So good morning or perhaps good afternoon to you out there. Welcome to this new treasuryXL session. It's organized with ETR Digital, and the title is The New Way Treasurers Are Managing Payables, Old Tools, New Tricks. Working capital is already quite prominent in quite a few treasurers' set of tasks, and is gaining importance because it's a way to have a bigger impact on your company. That's also why we decided to invite ETR Digital, who's one of the trailblazers and created an award-winning solution. Dominic has been quite a bit on the various stages because he invented something new with his colleagues. And they're here to share their expertise and inspire the Treasury community with what they invented. But before we give him the stage, let me first introduce the panel to you. Of course, Dominic already mentioned, co-founder of ETR Digital, former banker turned entrepreneur, fintech trailblazer, and together with his colleagues, as mentioned, he designed the working capital notes, which he will tell more about later on. Baris is here. Welcome, Baris. He's the winner of Adam Smith Award. So this is almost like corporate treasury nobility is present. Treasurer of the Year, and that should already say enough, but to tell a bit more about him, he's the Director of Treasury of Sisecam, a company with 21,000 employees, and they're big in glass and chemicals. And last but not least, we have Emre Aydin with us, also a former banker, co-founder, CEO of FaturaLab. You see it in the screen. And that's a marketplace platform and that supports clients in innovation in corporate treasury. And he can tell us about the implementation and beyond, and perhaps a wider perspective in tech. I'm Pieter. I will moderate this session, and it's a bit of a different format than we normally have, because there will be a bit of explaining on the concept where we start off, and then we want to include you, audience, and there are many of you. So there's the Q&A box. As soon as if you have any questions, please join and ask questions to the panelists here who are happy to share their experience and their expertise. We've got 45 minutes. I will stick there. The session will be recorded for later distribution, also to your colleagues and friends. And let's kick off the session. So start with the fundamentals, perhaps Baris, you first. Before you decided to implement the working capital notes, you saw a bottleneck or you saw an opportunity, apparently, with this solution. Can you tell a bit more about it, why you chose this solution?
Sure. Hi, everyone. As you said, Sisecam is performing in 12 countries, which means that we have a lot of countries which are connecting with the procurement companies. So we were looking after a solution which will be proper working for each country we have, and with a standardized way, which is a standard evaluation promise note goes between the banks and the companies, takes a huge time. Also, it takes a huge effort to follow up. Where is it? Who signed it, etc. As we have FaturaLab in Turkey for the supply chain finance, and we are always speaking with Emre about what can be done about that. And luckily, we find the ETR, the Dominic, which gives us a huge capability to speed up the process because all the process is digital. We are not running after where is the DHL, where is the UPS or other things, because we can follow all the flow in the digital way. Secondly, if we implement a classic way of that issue in each country, we should have someone to follow up the process. No need for that. Even in 12 countries, I can see the screen and keep on tracking on the flow. Where is it? So I can speed up the process. Theoretically, it comes a huge advantage because in 15 minutes, all the process can be finalized and the procurement companies, our supplier, gets the money. Yeah. And it's the supply chain game for me that you are strong as your weakest supplier. So we should be giving an opportunity to them to keep themselves financial capabilities better what they have. So this will also give us strength to Sisecam trade world.
Is this also more or less correlated to what we noticed in, for instance, during COVID, that supply chain were disturbed, and you saw the importance of certain suppliers?
Exactly. The main issue, we, as being a blue chip in Turkey and being a global player, we have huge abilities to reach a cheap financing, which are many of the suppliers doesn't. If they have a cheap financing, which means that my cost of goods will be lower and my profit margin will be improved, and also our suppliers' strength will be improving. So we are investing a lot for that supply chain health, we can say.
Yeah, and that goes beyond cutting costs. There's so much more to that. That makes total sense.
Exactly.
And Emre, Baris already mentioned you were the one bringing in the solution, but you as an advisor most likely have a wide choice of solutions you can offer, and there's so much more to working capital. What could be alternatives? And adding on what Baris says, how do you come to this specific solution?
What we have done in Turkey, basically we wanted to simply carry the best practice we have in Turkey, our home country, to UK and EU. And ETR Digital helped us in delivering this. In Turkey, we have electronic invoices approved by Sisecam or any buyer, and they are digitally traced, digitally recorded, avoiding any double discounting of any invoice, and everything is totally digital without the details of the invoice, without the pricing of goods and everything. They have a unique digital code, and they're all registered with the tax authority, IRS you may call, which means we have invoices. We can bundle them as per our needs. Our means customers' needs. So there is partial discounting. So totally cash flow management tool for a supplier. And we bundle these and then put in front of multiple size of 32 banks and get financing the same day. It's transactional supply chain finance with multiple funders. So we did for the last 5 years, we executed 8 million invoices with $6 billion financing in our home country. Now, what we wanted to do is with working capital notes and with ETR Digital is carry this best practice into basically the West, which is EU, UK, and EU. So it is digital. So we are making accepted invoices of Sisecam to their suppliers in EU and UK. We are digitalizing. We are making it tradable, unique, which Dominic will explain soon, and legally accepted, funding digitally accepted asset, which can be financed on a transactional basis rather than a general limit allocation and everything. So we are moving from supply chain finance programs, which you can find it everywhere in the world, where there are banks establishing bank limits, and then they are committed facilities, and everything is designed in a way that under that facility transactions go ahead. But in our marketplace, you can digitize invoice through ETR Digital, and then you can have multiple pricing, multiple banks, funders, and all this process is basically traceable, auditable, transparent, transaction-based, and totally addressing the needs of the buyer and the seller. Every transaction, my last note is every transaction is the there's no commitment to anybody. Every transaction is looked from a cost perspective, whether they are paying a fee to us or whether they are paying an interest rate to the bank. Everything is transparent in the process, and the supplier or whoever makes the final decision of discounting calls it accepted or reject the transaction the same day.
And just out of curiosity, because we will give the floor also not too long to Dominic to go into detail, but both you as well as Baris mention Turkey as of course that's your home country and that's where it's all initiated. Based upon your expertise, is this solution structured specifically on the Turkish situation, or should I ask later on Dominic? Would the structure be very different in another country?
Why we are mentioning about Turkey is our headquarters in Turkey, and our operations nearly 50% is in Turkey. But the transaction we have done with Dominic and Emre is a Hungary transaction, not Turkey transaction.
Based on UK law.
Yes, as trade is based on UK law, we cannot change that. So with the UK law documentary, it can be amplified for everywhere in the world. As far as I know, Dominic will be the best person to answer.
Yeah, and I think this is. But I have all questions popping up, but I think this perhaps would be the cue for Dominic to first take us by the hand and lead us. And what we normally hardly ever do is that we share a slide from, in this case, ETR Digital. And the floor is yours, Dominic. Can I? May I? You're muted. Can you unmute?
Thank you, Peter. And ladies and gentlemen, the slide is simply here to assist with the sort of the dialogue and I hope the understanding. So the search for the embedded on-demand supply chain finance solution that Baris and Emre referred to led Sisecam to working capital notes, which, as we've been discussing, are delivered by the FaturaLab platform, shown here on this slide, integrating ETR Digital's flow note technology into that. And this is built on the legal framework of age-old instruments, negotiable instruments such as promissory notes and bills of exchange. But the key difference is now they are issued and managed digitally, as Baris was explaining. So working capital notes convert approved invoices or purchase orders or other similar information into transferable instruments that can be financed and traded. And the diagram here shows how the process flow, very simple process flow, happens and therefore how the solution works. So to very quickly run through it, the supplier sends Sisecam invoices, let's say with 30-day terms, which have been selected for early settlement by them. So the on-demand element. Sisecam then uploads approved invoice data onto the FaturaLab platform, where they request the creation of working capital notes via ETR Digital. The working capital note is then created with a maturity date of, say, 180 days. That's at the discretion of Sisecam, and offered via ETR Digital to the bank. And the bank, and in our first case, I applaud and call out our friends at İşbank, who I hope are on the line joining us this morning. İşbank, or the bank, approves and takes possession, legal possession of the digital working capital note and remits the discounted value of that note, being the value, of course, of the underlying invoices, to the supplier, typically well ahead of the invoice due date. As Baris said, with our opening transactions, these all happened within a matter of hours. And at maturity of the working capital note, Sisecam remits the value of the note to the bank, İşbank, as I said, and the note is retired. And as such, the structure provides near real-time access to deeper liquidity pools than traditional supply chain finance programs can. So what are the key benefits to summarize? The supplier receives early payment in exchange for a small discount, which is often cheaper than their own funding costs and eliminates the risk of non-payment at maturity by Sisecam. Sisecam gains flexibility over settlement dates, extending their trade payables and improving their cash flow at no additional or minimal additional cost. İşbank, or the bank, receives a highly secure and referenceable instrument that is easily enforceable and also transferable to a future holder, known as a holder in due course. And all stakeholders together benefit from an automated process that integrates into existing procurement processes and transaction workflows with very little effort. So there we are, Peter. I hope I did the overview justice.
Here. Well, I got it, and that says something, because I think the audience is way more professional level than I have in this. And perhaps going back to you, Baris, in this new solutions implementation. I always have this standard thought: it's lowering cost, or it's opening opportunities, and it's mitigating risk. But I also hear quite a bit about the hassle nowadays. The treasurer says, well, price is one thing, but I also don't want too much of the hassle. Can you tell us a bit more about this solution and what of these four aspects I mentioned: cost reduction, mitigation, what works best, what shines for you?
Yeah. It's an easy transaction, different than the building up a TMS or something like that, because the info we send to FaturaLab from our ERP, which is SAP HANA 4, is the invoice details. And as an example, our supplier A, we upload the invoices there, and then we create a promissory note for the invoices. Invoice A, B, C, and total is €100, and we create the promissory note. Then the process goes like Dominic shows, and which is just a file transfer from ERP to FaturaLab. At end of the process, as the promissory note is created and sent to the supplier, then another file comes and says that this promissory note is discounted by supplier via bank X, which is İşbank in our example. Then with this file, I correct my accounting records, because debt is not to supplier, then debt is to İşbank London. So there is two file transfers mainly. So there's a huge effort. The huge effort is done by FaturaLab. Thank you very much, Emre Bey, for that, because they are struggling with the bank, and they are struggling, and Dominic for sure, because the signings and the others process is there. For us as a customer, just two files from SAP to FaturaLab and FaturaLab to SAP. It's easy. Just one of the motivation we have when we are implementing this project. On the otherwise, if we do it in a classical way, we should be watching and trying to understand where it is. Then we should be doing the accounting records manually.
Yeah, get it. And also a question from the audience, very practical, and I totally get it. Perhaps Emre, you can answer. There's a whole ecosystem of companies, of banks, of suppliers, who is connecting all, because there's a lot of communication there involved, and it should be all kinds of portals. Does it mean that this whole ecosystem is connected to the solution, and who does the communication?
Well, I am a banker. I used to be a banker. So in the bank, the projects were taking a lot of time to execute from a technology perspective, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Now, why I became a co-founder of a technology company is because I saw how quickly these can be done, which I didn't have it in my life. Yes, you're right. Our focus was always, we are getting ecosystems of corporates in one platform. So if it comes to that, we are a working capital optimization platform where all these parties, multiple funders, we have 32 financial institutions connected to us. which is easy thanks to technology. We have
Mhm.
ETR, we have ERP system of Sisecam, which is important because we get the invoices and then we process them, and then we go to Sisecam on the same day, reconciliation automatically done through a plugin system that we have with SAP.
Yeah, okay. But I think that creating the system is the biggest work. If it's in place, then of course it gets overseeable, so to say. Yeah.
But if I
You're
can add
right.
in, sorry, Emre, if I can add in Pieter, because I think I sort of saw the question.
Yeah.
Together with our friends at FaturaLab, the technology is designed so that it's not a closed-end user subscription system. So, for example, where Sisecam have many suppliers, they don't have to pre-onboard to either FaturaLab or to ETR Digital in order to transact. They are sent, in the case of a promissory note transaction, a working capital note, but it takes the legal form of a promissory note. They are simply sent the instrument to review. They're given a one-time login, a user ID authentication process, and they take the relevant action, typically to assign or endorse, as it's known, that instrument across to the bank for financing, and they do that through DocuSign, a universally known adopted digital signature process.
Yeah.
So ease of access and ease of engagement has been at the forefront of our collective thinking here, because we know that if you've got to onboard dozens, hundreds, in Sisecam's case, of suppliers onto a platform before they can start using it, you're never going to get started.
Yeah, get it. I think before we go to the questions, because they're flowing in, I think perhaps it's our turn to ask the audience a question, because we have a poll, and I think it's relevant also to blend it into the session. So I have this poll created here, Wout of treasuryXL, biggest obstacle to improve your working capital. So I hope you can look at the opportunity of the options you've got here. Why is your working capital not yet at the level where you want it at? And is it the internal process? Is it the resistance from the external parties? The right funding solutions? I see. Oh, wow. I see a lot of varied answers. So I normally we have in this polls one winner, but we don't have a winner yet. I think the final answer, I will end the poll, will be liked by Dominic, because the internal processes and complexity is the most obvious. The cash flows is not that prominent, and the supplier and the customer resistance, as well as the solutions, which are of course also the financial services providers very much interested in, is mentioned equally. Anyone of the panel wants to respond? Are you surprised?
Not typically totally surprised. Depending on where one sits as a business, what one's access to liquidity is, the answers are going to be different. But I am indeed smiling because, a combination of those factors is absolutely, Pieter, what we have set out, again, with our friends at FaturaLab, to address. The key thing to stress, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. And that has been the historical challenge with many of the sort of institutionally led supply chain finance solutions that have been around the market for a couple of decades.
I may add also, sorry, Baris, I may add, we don't look at an ecosystem as a supply chain finance program. We look at it as a KPI of the company, whether it's receivables or finance, whether that company that we are talking is a seller or buyer, because our platform allows them to become both. So we have companies who are buyer and seller in the same platform. So it's working capital platform, which means, as Dominic said, we are flexible in terms of execution. So technology provides all of that, and that's our strong point. Whoever has a KPI who wants to do something, this can be done with the total ecosystem by putting them in a seller or buyer position.
Yeah. And I think I already have the answer for this one because it connects well to what you're saying here. There's a question specifically for Baris. What homework from perspective like technology, education, training, did you have to do internally to get the implementation of this product?
To be honest, technology is solved with FaturaLab and ETR. Thanks again for your guidance. And for the education and training, we spent a lot about the working capital management solutions of the banks. But I guess the key point for having such kind of transaction is the having an open-minded treasury team, thanks to my team, because as I said, we speak a lot with Emre of how we can solve that issue. And thinking about creativity is the main homework, I guess, because standardized ways or old ways are not fast enough for nowadays world, which we have the fast and furious ways for each transaction of the treasury.
Well, it's music to my ears because what you mentioned here is all about people, and some of you already might know I'm a recruiter, so the human component is essential, I suppose, in this. Yeah. I saw a very creative question, and I think this is one for Dominic. Does ETR Digital offer secondary market capabilities, aka trading of the working capital notes?
100% yes, absolutely. And that's achieved through our digital signature process because with a negotiable instrument, so working capital note, that transfer of possession, this all comes down to the legal point of possession. I don't want to get too deep into the detail, is achieved through the current holder, and that's of course recorded and uniquely recorded within our system, transferring possession of the instrument onto another party, as I said earlier, holder in due course, Peter, through a digital signature. So it can happen multiple times during a instrument's life cycle.
Nice. There's a lot of questions flowing in, and I'm now trying to find the right angle here because I have to cluster them in a sense. I do still want to go into what you already mentioned, the ownership, Dominic, and the legality of things. I think perhaps this is first for you, Dominic, to answer, but you are operating in a ecosystem, in a very international one, where Turkey, UK, Hungary, I hear, so it's EU, non-EU, it's going in all directions. All these countries have their own fiscal, their own legal frameworks. What do you do to keep a grip on all of this?
So our technology, our Flownote technology at ETR Digital, Peter, has been designed around the core principles laid out in the UN model law for electronic transferable records, known as MILITA, and specifically local legislative interpretations of those. So countries that have passed MLETR-based legislation include, of course, the UK with the Electronic Trade Documents Act in 2023. France passed equivalent legislation last year. Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates in the form of the DIFC and ADGM, Singapore, Bahrain, the list goes on. Now, the wonderful thing is, and this is work I was involved in getting on for a decade ago, is because all of those legislations take their root from the model law, there's complementarity of that legislative process, meaning that there's not an entirely different standard applied in, for example, today France than is applied in the UK, because legislators have realised in the context of trade, and those laws go beyond negotiable instruments to include other very well used forms of trade documents, such as bills of lading, warehouse receipts, etc. They knew they absolutely shouldn't create legal islands that were not complementary.
Yeah.
So that's the sort of the core MLETR principle, and at its heart, it gets to issues around control, singularity, integrity, compliant signatures in the EU EIDAS compliant signatures, because enforceability of the asset lies with the instrument. And that's, as I said, the way that we have built our technology. Some people have expressed concern that, because English law is predominant in the world of global trade, as Baris mentioned earlier, an English law working capital note could be invalid if it was concluded between non-UK parties on the grounds that it fails to meet local law, local legal form requirements. This is, I think, a very theoretical argument and is highly unlikely to manifest, because English courts, if we're talking about instruments issued under English law, such as Sisecam did, exhibit a very strong presumption in favour of upholding express choices of law. And working capital notes using our system are always written with a codicil expressing which law the parties have issued them under. International legal conventions like the Hague Conventions typically ensure that English law and other judgments are enforceable in other jurisdictions, so leaving the courts in the enforcing jurisdiction with minimal scope for reviewing the decision of the court that has passed judgment. And commercial realities and the way that, again, our technology works, with a note, for example, issued in London, and we have servers using the DocuSign technology across multiple locations, really diminish any residual concerns that there might be. So, Sisecam presents a perfect use case. A Turkish company working in the first instance with a branch of a Turkish bank in London, financing a buyer and a supplier based in Hungary.
Nice. Let's steer away from the legal, because international law is also a bit of a dangerous topic in these modern times, especially for a Dutch blunt guy like me. Let's talk money to make it less sensitive. There's quite a few questions popping up on the cost of the solution. And perhaps first I can steer to you, Emre. Implementing this kind of solution, what kind of cost do people working with? And you're still muted.
Again, our approach was a little bit different from the legacy platforms. Coming back to cost, we decided to charge our customers based on 2 points. One is we don't charge them for integration. None of the banks, none of the corporates has to pay anything. So coming back to your Baris question, in the company of Sisecam, we had procurement teams totally involved into the process, and also the IT team is totally involved, and we didn't charge them anything on any of the solution that we provided. So our fee is based on executed transactions, which is important. The second point, our approach is, as I said, we sit down with the corporate and try to understand their key performance indicators. What are you trying to achieve? Is the receivables and payables are a joint solution? Can we do something like that? Or is it the payables, or is it the only receivables? We look at that. So whoever pays the cost has to have a benefit. if it's the main company, which usually Sisecam comes with certain strategy, but also the supplier will have a strategy. So our platform allows, for example, in this case, Sisecam, apply different pricing to different supplier groups, different markets, different tenors, depending on the cost in Turkey. So we are using Dominic's technology, Flownote technology. Let me pull it, the Flownote platform, by using that experience into Europe. So it's a totally flexible cost structure, and we only charge whoever gets the benefit based on accepted transaction, not rejected, from the supplier or buyer, depending on the KPI. Sometimes the buyers pay for it because it fits to their strategy in terms of, having suppliers, sustainable supply chain and everything. There can be certain group of suppliers which are key for their production, and they want to support them, and the cost is not passed on to the suppliers. But in certain cases, suppliers require early funding, so the supplier pays. So our platform is flexible, as Dominic pointed out, in terms of how to apply it to different groups, different banks, different funding structures. So we don't charge anything for implementation, integration, and so forth.
Those who are interested can reach out to you and Dominic, and in essence, if you don't get a solution, you don't pay. That's more or less what's there. And two questions for Baris, or first one is it's also from the audience. Are you willing to say something about the pricing of the financial services providers out there, the banks or other financial services? Does this solution influence their pricing, or is it as is?
I can easily say that the pricing is cheaper than the bilateral credits, because it is, as my peers are knowing that the banks are knowing where is the money going. So it's a trade finance, which cheapens than the bilateral credits, to be honest.
Nice.
And also the issue is about the pricing. And logically, the discounting order or transaction comes from the supplier, and the banks takes the buyer's risk. But at the end, as the bank solves the trade, so all the trade is transparently shown, even the invoice details. So it helps the bank to cheapen the financing, I guess.
Yeah, get it. Yeah. And I invite all.
If I just add in, one of the reasons for that is, unlike invoice finance, where, as many on the call will know, the financiers have to take into account, potential rejection of the invoice for sort of non-delivery or non-performance. So although the payment risk is indeed on the buyer, there is inherent supplier risk in that. The legal separation with a working capital note removes that element. The note is a separate legal instrument from the invoice. And that therefore means two key things alongside hopefully attractively priced finance. It means that most lenders will finance between 95 and 100% of the note value, because they have a enforceable on-demand instrument in their possession. And it therefore solves for that problem inherent within invoice finance, which I call the don't want to pay problem at maturity. This is you pay at maturity, or there's a very quick and actionable legal route for the holder to take to get enforcement.
Yeah, get it. I invite all panelists to go scroll through the Q&A and the chats, because there's quite a lot that we will not be able to answer, and we only have 5 minutes left. But I think one I think the audience would want an answer to is one for I think for Baris. What's the balance sheet treatment remain as payable, or is it recognized as bank debt?
For the buyer, it is not bank debt because we just give the promissory note. We are not the part of the financing. For the supplier, it can be a bank debt because they are discounting the financial instrument they have. I'm not 100% for sure, but for us, we give a promissory note for our trade payable, so it's trade payable.
Yeah,
I want to underline that we are not a part of the discounting part. We just give the promissory note. Discounting, in this example, it is İşbank because our supplier's bank was İşbank. But mostly the supplier decides where to discount and the discounting rates. We are not a part of it as a buyer.
Yeah, get it.
So we are, as the platform, getting from the SAP system of Sisecam their payment data, and then we are making it with ETR Digital. We are making it a transferable, digitable, enforceable asset, and then allowing banks and suppliers to use it. So in a way, that's the summary of the solution.
Yeah.
This
Well, I also think it connects to I think a majority of the people in the audience are treasurers, and there's the whole discussion of cash is reality and profit is an opinion, and all kinds of those jokes are going around. But if you have to convince your CFO or your group controller or anyone out there of the treasury environment, there's new wording and there's new KPIs, and what convinces you totally might not be what convinces them. So I think for a lot of these topics are then relevant, I suppose. I can imagine that both Emre and Dominic also encountered that with multiple clients, and I also really see Baris agreeing with this aspect.
Well, and Pieter, you mentioned the word KPI, and I would say for anybody listening and planning to adopt this sort of a process, which is really very straightforward, it's make sure you've thought through the KPIs more internally than externally, because to the seller of the working capital note, so typically the supplier, it represented a true sale when Sisecam's supplier sold that instrument. And because of the nature of the working capital note, that could be done on a without recourse basis, because what the bank, İşbank, our friends at İşbank were interested in was the fact that they were taking possession of an enforceable instrument, a trade payable for Baris and his team, that they knew would be paid at maturity, at the agreed maturity date. So I hopefully that answers the sort of a question around who's discounting the issued promissory note. And just to add in, because I know this is a particular point for our friends in Turkey, indeed, it is very straightforward, and our process allows for it, for a bank to add their aval. So, for example, İşbank can add their aval to promissory notes issued by Sisecam, and those same notes can be then financed by another money center bank, in the London market, or indeed elsewhere. And it doesn't need to be a bank. Certainly avalized notes with İşbank's imprimatur on them are going to be very readily funded by trade funds, family offices, other providers of liquidity, which is why we reference the fact that these instruments open up much deeper pools of liquidity than hitherto available. Yeah,
and that is an excellent way to wrap up this session, Dominic. Thank you very much for this, because I said I was strict on the 45 minutes, and there's many questions left, which is, in my perception, a good sign. I can't speak for the audience, but I learned a lot, and I love this topic because I think it enables the corporate treasury community to have a way bigger impact and show the value of good treasury. So thank you very much for that, Dominic, Baris, and Emre. Of course, thank you people from ETR Digital and from treasuryXL. there are many more webinars scheduled, so hope to see you out there, and also in the Treasury events that are now being organized out there with the various suppliers of those.
Thank you.
So thank you all,
Peter.
and have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.